rebuilding confidence, and harmonizing with nature. With over 4 decades of changing lives, your self-discovery archaeologist, get ready to be the best of you with your host, Beverly Zymet.
Hello and welcome to the Beverly Zymet Show, where being the best you has just gotten easier. My guest today is Michelle Jewsbury, and she's calling in from LA, and it's early in the morning for you, Michelle.
Yes, it is, but that's totally fine. It's nice to get up early every now and then. I typically don't get up early, so 7 a.m. is beautiful.
Beautiful.
It is, and I'm actually looking forward to going for a run after this, so that's good.
Well, at least it's nice out there. It's cold here today in Denver. It's like 43 degrees. It rained all night. It is freezing. We've got like 6 inches of fresh snow in the mountains. It's crazy.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's June.
I know.
Crazy to me.
I
Yeah.
know it's June. Oh my gosh, back in the 80s, we had 12 inches in town of snow on July 12th. And I got pictures of the kids jumping off the deck, in their shorts and t-shirts into the snow. It was silly.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of spring skiing, you can do summer skiing then.
Yeah. They actually, I think it was like a couple weeks ago, we had a lot of snow up in the mountains again. And they actually opened one of the ski lifts for a day or 2 days.
Oh, that's cool.
I know.
You won't see that in LA. It's supposed to be like 98 degrees today.
I don't think it's going to reach that today at all. And we've had some crazy weather, even over the weekend. There were a lot of trees down over where I live out in Brighton. And, oh my gosh, there were big trees just uprooted. So it's been windy and crazy, and who knows, right? The weather's just as crazy as the rest of the world.
Well, climate change is a real thing, and the rest of the world is showing us that anything can happen. So,
man, I'll tell you, it's an interesting time to be on the planet, isn't it?
it is an interesting time. It's a bit scary. I know there's a lot of people with a lot of fear right now.
Right.
But it's not something that we can't overcome. But there's significant changes that need to happen all the way around.
Right. And then I'm a firm believer that those changes have to start within the self, because the more change you make in the self, the more impact you have outside of the world, because it's energy. We're all connected. We're all one, so what one person does ripples out to everybody else. And so it's like you got fear rippling this way, and you got love and, high energies rippling this way, and then they collide, and who has the most wins, so to speak, right? So.
Yeah, no, it is. And yesterday I listened to one of my favorite pastors, Erwin McManus, do a seminar, and he ended up talking about human beings and how we're all flowers. There's roses, there's daffodils, there's lilies, there's sunflowers, whatever you name it, but we're all flowers. It's the same thing that we're all humans. We all bleed the same color. We're all human beings, but then there are white, black, Asian, Filipino, you name it. We're different, but we're all the same, and we all came from the same source. So we need to start acting like that. So it is, we have to change from within, and that's what we teach as well. So it's all about your mentality, the way that you believe, how you can overcome a lot of your past events, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, and it's so much needed. I mean, it's always been needed, but I really feel that when they've talked about the awakening, and I think we're really in the midst of all of that awakening, and the wake-up call that we're getting to really start to internalize what's going on here and become an expression of it. I like your little sign up there. It says unsilenced voices, right? You'll have to talk about that in a little bit, because the voice needs to be heard, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I started this show as well, and being that best you that you can be. So every day, if you make it a point to become an even better you and get that vibration uplifted, and this is a space, just a neutral ground, shall we say, to be able to be that expression of what your story is. And sometimes just being able to get that out and other people hearing it makes a difference in their lives. So if you only touch one person's life, that's been made a big difference, right?
Well, expressing yourself is extremely important. And the thing is if you've had emotional trauma, emotional pain, and you don't get it out, if you don't write about it, if you don't talk about it, if you don't get it out of your soul, then it turns out that there's physical and or emotional ailments that happen
Yes.
because of that in your future. And we teach that a lot. So we teach a whole 5-step process to overcome obstacles, because I've experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of pain in my life, hence why I started a nonprofit organization called Unsilenced Voices, where we serve so many people around the world and help survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse. And we teach that. I mean, you have to be able to speak up. And especially right now, there are so many people who are speaking up. And it's great to see the people who are speaking up in a healthy way, who aren't looting and who aren't destroying our communities, but the
Right.
peaceful protesters, right? It's important for people to hear their voice.
And I think you really tapped on something right there, because people need recognition, right? And they're going to get recognition. It's just like a little kid, right? If he wants attention or she wants attention, they're going to do something. And a lot of times I don't like good and bad, but that's what we've distinguished it on the planet here. So if they're doing something that's really good, a lot of times it goes without acknowledgement, right? Without recognition. So they start to act out because that's where they get the attention, and that follows into, the older you get and everything that you're doing. So again, when you look at the riots and things that are going on and the disturbances that are happening, it's because they want that attention. And the media is going to give it, which is, so there's twofold there, right?
There's also another side of that too. So, for example, my brother and I are complete opposites, but we grew up in the same household with the same mom and dad. My brother, growing up, he decided to rebel most of his life because that's how he got the attention that he so craved. Mm-hmm. And then I decided subconsciously that I was going to excel. So I was a straight A student, and I was National Honor Society, Dean's List, you name it. So I worked to excel in my life, and he rebelled. Now, both cases, like you said, we wanted attention, but the attention that we so needed, that we desperately needed, it wasn't like, I just want attention. It was necessary for our core. And it's the same thing with these rioters and these protesters, because there has been something happening on this planet that shouldn't be happening. And now we finally come to a head where people are seeing it. And it's like, it's not just attention anymore, but we have to bring attention to it so we can bring awareness to it to make change.
Yeah. And, and again, I agree with you 100% with that. Violence, I don't think is the way to go. But to be able to speak loud, and the destruction, this is one thing I never understood, is the destruction and the harm that you bring to others that that have no connection to what the upper echelon and the things that need to be addressed, right? So if you got a problem with a political party or something like that, then go after that. Don't go after your neighbor who's got a business over here and burn it down.
Yeah, but that's not all of the protesters. That's just a certain portion, And then, like Martin Luther King Jr., he advocated for protesting, but peaceful protests, and that's what we're starting to see more of now, which is great. Is the peaceful protest, and that's what we need. And I think
that's great. And to have a strong leader in that can keep the crowds, where they need to be. So that they don't, because all it takes is, one bad apple, and boom, everybody's running, right? And it's like, whoa, But I agree with you. The voices need to be heard, because it is heard around the world. It's not just here in our country. It's global, and that is, I don't think anything in history has ever happened on a global platform like this, where every country in the world has been impacted to that degree.
Well, we
And-
have information at our fingertips. I mean, these things, these little cell phones.
Oh my gosh.
There's more computing power in this than there was in the very first ginormous computer that they ever made.
Right.
And we're communicating in an instant with people across the world. I do Zoom meetings with a gal from Australia all the time because we're starting another business, and it's instantaneous. We get instant information. So
Right.
I was on social media, of course, and I was viewing some of these protests and Paris, France, and around the globe, like you're saying. It's really insane, but we need to make significant change worldwide. It's not just the United States.
Oh, yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
it is global. And like you said, the technology. I mean, look at us. Okay, you're in LA and I'm in Denver.
Yeah.
You know, and okay, you spoke with someone in Australia yesterday. I was on the phone with someone in Australia yesterday, right? And, you know, following this, you know, recording at noon today, I'm dealing with the UK, right?
Yeah.
And a couple days ago, South Africa, you know, so we are at your fingertips, you know, right here, face to face, you know, and the clarity.
And what a day right now. This is really a time for us to realize that we all do, I hate to repeat myself, but bleed red. We're all human beings, you know? So and it's a global society, a global planet. And that's what people don't necessarily see. Now, we don't need to get into politics, but you know, international relations and, you know, communicating with people offshore, it's very, very important to have all of those in place. You know?
Right, and I think it's shows like this and communities like your unsilenced voices there, you know, that really start to unite, you know, everyone from different parts of the world, because we are not that different from one another. You know,
and the discrimination, it's not just racial discrimination. There's gender discrimination. There's religious discrimination.
Right.
There are so many different types of discriminations and injustices that need to be addressed and stopped.
Right.
And that's what, you know, we're starting to see. We're gonna have the racial one probably put to an end. We're hoping soon. This is why, you know, the rioters and protesters are out there. But then we still have a slew of other things that we need to address.
Right.
And these other things are also, you know, the gender discrimination. I travel all around the world, and I spend a lot of time in Ghana and Sierra Leone, Africa. And, you know, we have a core group of people who work for us there. And a lot of the injustices that we see, especially to women. You know, I was just in the Middle East not too long ago, and I saw it firsthand, the way that women are treated around the world. And it's something that needs to be stopped and something that needs to be addressed. More people need to be able to speak up, because women should never be beat, yelled at, scolded, raped, trafficked, you name it.
Right.
And it happens to men as well, just a lot less than it happens to women.
Right. And, you know, you can say, oh, well, it's our culture. You know, culture or not, it's the treatment of the human element. I had this statement made yesterday when I was on this podcast with the gal from, the one from Australia, right? She made this comment of walking around in this, let's see, how did she put it? Human meat machine. I'm like, oh, I've never heard the human body called that before. It was just kind of like, whoa. But it's so true. You know, the vehicle, the vessel that our soul is moving around in has all the different pieces and parts and colors and shapes and, you know, everything that goes on. But when you get down to what's below that, and that's your soul. That's the soul essence of who you are. And again, we're all one. We all come from the same power source, right? And we're running off of that. And that's where all that knowledge is and that information. And it's getting back to tapping into that and really understanding what that truth is. And that's the expression that needs to come. Every one of us has a different belief and a different truth, but it's honoring. You know, if you can just honor the other person for what their beliefs are and what their truths are. There's no right or wrong. There's just an is, and everyone has their own is. Honor that, because
and
you know
respect.
what? Yeah, and respect.
You gotta respect each other,
Yeah.
no matter what you believe. So one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite people ever, his name is George Chanos. And he talks about that. And this is one of the basic skill sets that we need for the 21st century is empathy. We need
Oh my
to
gosh.
empathize with one another. Even if we disagree, just be able to have a civil conversation without getting into a fight, because there is that possibility that the
Right.
other person could be correct.
That's
So
right.
it's just opening your eyes, opening your ears, and having those morals and values and respecting one another. So
Right. Yeah, it seems like everyone wants to go on that defense, right? And be right. Well, everybody's right. Nobody's wrong. There's no such thing as that. And again, we look at that positive, negative. It's only a charge. What are you charging? You know, a negative charge is necessary to make a positive charge move forward. A negative charge is needed to turn that light on that's up above here. A negative charge is needed to turn this computer on so that we can communicate. You know, so negative and positive has to have that harmony. Females and male have to have that harmony. You are half male and half female. You need that harmony, right? So understand where that's at. And just because someone believes differently, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because look at your past. You believed one thing, and sometimes, you know, because it's so instilled in that cell memory. And this is when you talk about the emotional things, right? It becomes your personality trait, so to speak. It's in your genetic, it's in your genes, and it's an automatic response because it's so embedded in that subconscious memory. It runs on autopilot. That's an old belief from the database that's outdated from your past.
Yeah, and it's
Right.
also oftentimes when you go through a traumatic experience or any experience, really,
Right.
you make a story about what that is.
Yes.
And that we live in that story. So we don't live in the reality of what actually happened. Say, for example, you were hurt when you were a child. Say you broke your leg and you made a story up that because your brother pushed you or something, that all men are evil. Because
Right.
he pushed you out of a tree and you broke your leg. So you grow up believing all men are evil your entire life, and you're putting that out into the environment, into the atmosphere, and then in result you have horrible relationships with men.
Right.
You can't seem to find a romantic partner, et cetera, whatever that is. When the reality of it is your brother just sucked at the time and pushed you out of a tree. You know? So it's not that all men are evil, because not all of them are evil.
Right.
It's just that in that situation, that person was
Right.
not respecting you.
Right.
So,
And that story, you know, that story keeps repeating on autopilot, you know, and maybe your brother really didn't push you. Maybe you were slipping and he grabbed
Yeah.
to reach you and he didn't get you in time and down you went. You know, so the distortion is crazy and it just gets worse as you know, go on.
get older. Yes.
And so to be able to recognize that old database and to be able to eliminate the old database so that you can put the new truth in, you know, so respecting and honor someone's belief and your own, respect and honor your own belief and say, hey, you know what, that used to be my truth, that was my truth, and you've got to acknowledge that, because when you acknowledge the old truth as being the truth, the subconscious will let go of it. Otherwise, it's going to hang on, just like a kid that says, this is mine. You can't have it. It's mine, 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 right?
Yeah. And then that's where the ailments come from, you know, the physical and
Exactly.
emotional ailments, autoimmune disorders,
Yeah.
chronic fatigue, chronic headaches, you know, anxiety, stress, you name it. All of that comes from past events.
Exactly.
Holding on to it.
Holding on to it because we swallow it. We bury that emotional, you know, connection there. And again, it's that charge. So what's charging an emotion is just that. It's a word. It's what do you feed it? What do you charge it with? And the feeling is the charge of the emotion.
Yeah.
You know, so if you have anger, you're fueling it with what? With pain, with upset, you know, all these other little branches are feeding that anger, and that anger stores in the liver. How many people out here have liver issues, right? And then right alongside of that is gallbladder problems with bitterness. Anger and bitterness go together,
Yeah.
right?
They do.
You know,
They do,
and so
100%.
now you have digestive problems because you can't stomach
Yeah.
things anymore. And then it goes into the fear base. Now you're having problems with your kidneys. It just continues to multiply. But when we understand that, where all these things are stored, and you start clearing that out.
Yep.
And again, it's getting that voice out, that story.
Voice out, yeah, exactly.
Voice
and
out.
It comes full circle now.
It
about
does.
Speaking up, about
Yeah.
getting it out of your system, because you have to. Because if you don't, then you really will. I deal with a lot of people who have experienced trauma. Typically, women who have experienced some type of emotional and or physical abuse from their partner or growing up, and they hold on to that, and because they believe in their stories, because they believe in what happened, and they continue feeding that belief system, like you said, then they have a really hard time recovering. And I mean, we teach an entire 10-step process. We have a 17-week platform. It's a master class and then an intensive where we teach to help people overcome their obstacles. And the first 10 steps is just getting them to realize what actually happened.
Right. It's that recognizing what the truth is, and then acknowledging that, okay, that was then, but this is now. Now we can adjust.
Move forward.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest step, is that acknowledging it as being the truth.
Yeah.
And it's tough because it doesn't taste good, it doesn't smell good, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't sound good, it doesn't look good. So you got all your senses playing in here, right? But you've got to acknowledge it as being your truth.
Yes.
The false truth of what it is, but it was the truth when you created it.
Yeah. When I was writing my first book, I had a therapist at the time, and I see him regularly, to stay healthy. And during the time, I was in my old belief system, and I didn't want to feel, right? I didn't want to go through that pain because it's not comfortable to recover. And he helped me go through it, but it wasn't easy. It was very, very painful. I cried a lot, especially dealing with a lot of the emotional and physical abuse that I experienced from my abuser.
Right.
And going through that, it took me years to finally overcome. But now I know how to regulate myself. I know that when I'm in a sticky situation emotionally, I can handle it. It's just not easy. People don't realize that in order to heal, you have to feel.
Oh, that is so true. Oh, I just got chills when you said that, because it is true, But you don't have to feel for a long time. You can feel for a short time, and that's your free will. That's your choice. So what's the intensity that you want to feel? And again, when you're going back and you're experiencing those things when it comes up. So what comes up comes out. If you can use that. So if it comes up, it's ready to come out, and to be able to understand it. And when you're dealing with it, 95% of all of that fuel that's being fed isn't something that's created in you. It comes from attaching emotions by talking with people, with friends, you're sharing, or they're sharing their sob story, whatever it is, right? Now you're taking on, because you're taking sympathy instead of empathy, as you mentioned earlier. Now their problem becomes your problem, so it gets bigger and more distortion. You watch a movie and you find yourself crying because you feel their pain and all of that. You read something in the media, you hear someone else's story. All of these things, because thought is magnetic, is piling on your stuff. So really,
and you relate it to yourself.
You do,
and then you justify it almost. You justify your experiences. You justify your thoughts, your feelings. You justify the words that come out of your mouth. Yeah. So
justification is crazy, So when you start making up these excuses, you got to justify those excuses so that you appear to be correct. Right? Because everybody wants to be right. Nobody wants to be wrong. Well, when you get the right and wrong out of the way, it's okay, Yeah. And it's like, what are people going to think of me? Right? I have to act like this. I have to be like this. What are people going to think of me? They're not going to like me. Well, there's billions of people out there in the world. I promise you, somebody's going to like you. But you got to like yourself, So when that's going on and you're having these thoughts, just remember, everyone else out here in front of you is having those same crazy thoughts. Maybe you should change your crazy thoughts. Maybe their crazy thoughts will change, and people will start to harmonize with one another instead of be at this
And that's what we need, you know. So we teach, I'll quickly go over 5-step process because we're right there. This is exactly what we're talking about. The first
Okay.
step is recognition.
That's what I do on mine. I want to see how they're going to
Exactly,
get recognition.
right? And then thoughts, and then feelings, and then words, and then actions.
Right.
So it's the 5-step process to help you overcome your obstacles. Now, we talk about this, of course, in the masterclass and the intensive.
Right.
But these steps, it's just like you're talking about. We need to realize what we're going through. We need to be able to elevate our thoughts. We need to regulate our feelings and be able to express ourselves. We need to understand that the words coming in and the words going out of our mouth and into our brain, so whether it be podcasts or other information, really greatly affect us. And then once you're able to conquer those 4, then you can take the action steps necessary to really heal.
Exactly. And that word right there is key, action. You know,
Yep.
all the knowledge and information in the world is priceless, but it's worthless if you don't put it into action, right?
Yep, exactly. And then there's that imaginary 6th step, that's results. Now,
Right. Yeah.
Once you take those steps, then you do get results. Then you start to feel better. Then you can go out into the community and you can speak what's happened to you, and then be able to express yourself so that other people can do the same thing.
Right. And
The domino effect.
The domino effect, and that expression to be able to do that, because what happens when you're going through that process, you know, the 5 steps that I use are real similar. It's recognition, acknowledgement, then the release, then the replacing, because you got to replace what you just got rid of, the old. You got to replace it with the new, and then you accept that as your new truth. So when you're combining what you just said and what I just said together, right, now you're shifting, and what you've actually done is you've unplugged the charge, the energy that's feeding, the energy that's that negative charge that's feeding that emotion is gone, so that now you can speak it without crying, without feeling pain. It just becomes an event.
Yeah.
Just
an
event.
that took place. Yeah.
That's right. That's made you stronger. That's made you who you are. And has given you that voice to be able to become that expression.
And that's what's so important, is that voice, because there's so many people, like you said, there's 7 billion people on this planet. And once you're able to express yourself and show others that you can heal,
Right.
then they think that they can heal as well.
Right.
And they learn from you, and then they can go out and affect the world and make change, because that's what we want to do. Is we want to impact people so much that it creates that domino effect of creating change around the world.
And that is so true, and that's what's so powerful, you know, in shows like this and different podcasting and just being on stage and being that expression, just getting that information out there, you know, because the more people that hear it, the more people will hear it, the more people will share, right? And when that happens, you're creating a massive world healing, right? If we can create massive destruction, why can't we create massive healing? Right?
Exactly.
You know, and that's where
with
focus.
all of these injustices, these the racial discrimination, the gender discrimination, religious discrimination, just discrimination in general, and all of these the corruption that we see in countries around the world, and how it impacts, how it trickles down and impacts even children playing, you know, with their toys on the streets. It's mind-boggling that people don't understand that we are all so connected, and that we have to respect each other so much that we can see harmony, that we can see peace, the way that we were supposed to be.
Exactly. Get back to the root of where it started, and that's what that soul is of pureness, right?
Yeah.
Right? And that, you know, I've talked harmony like forever, you know, and I don't know about you, but sometimes you talk to people about, you know, you start bringing, you know, both sides of the fence, the extremes, you bring it together to reach that harmony, and they look at you like deer in the headlights. What's harmony?
Like, what?
Yeah, what's harmony?
And you know, there are some situations where the pendulum, right, was so far this way, and now it's swung all the way here, and you need to settle it down.
Right.
And that's the harmony that you're talking about, is the settling it down to where both sides understand and come together and see.
Exactly. We live in this world of duality, so you're going to have, like you said, your pendulum going one way and the pendulum going the other way, to bring it back down to where now it can harmonize and balance itself. And that all starts in here. When you can bring your sides together, it happens in here. So you can't be on both sides of the fence at the same time. I wrote a book. Which side of the fence are you on?
Okay.
Right? Which is the duality of the world. Because you can't have joy if you're over here in sadness.
Yep.
You can't have love if you're over here in fear. You can't have both at the same time. Which one do you want? Which side of the fence do you want to be on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And the positives sometimes may be a little more tricky to get to, but it's worth the run.
It is. Unfortunately, we live in a negative world, so there's more of that out there, and the media likes to push it out there because that's what sells, unfortunately, right? And so it's getting that shift, and sometimes too, interpretation, how we interpret things. So when we listen to the news media and the things that are out there, we're only getting half-truths, and then we allow our minds to take off in the old database of information, right? So it's like discriminating between what is truth and what isn't, and what's hidden below it, so...
Yeah, it's insane. One of my favorite books is called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill.
I've read that book. Oh my gosh.
I heard the audio is just mind-blowing. I haven't listened to the audio yet, but the next long drive that I take, that's my plan.
I would imagine if somebody's got their voice into that. The first time I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I had to turn around and read it right again because it was like, oh my gosh, this is like...
It's a great book, and it talks exactly about what you're talking about, not allowing our circumstances to rule us. And if you're living in sadness, then how do you get to happiness?
Right.
And it's not listening to all of these negative factors in life. Not listening to the devil try to corrupt us and continue to keep us down. So it's breaking those chains, and that's what we need to do.
It's an interesting story too, because that book was written, I think, back in the 30s, maybe something like that, the 20s and the 30s. And it wasn't published because there was, again, like, oh my gosh, if you put that out there now, because the public wasn't ready for it. And so it come out in recent years, but it is so impactful. And right now, if you guys haven't read that book by Napoleon Hill, what's the exact name of it?
Outwitting the Devil.
Outwitting the Devil.
So it's written by Napoleon Hill, but it's excerpt by Sharon Lechter. So Sharon Lechter has a lot of information in that book as well, which is really great, and she kind of breaks down a lot of what Napoleon
so she went through and said, okay, now this is how it fits in and interprets and stuff. Yeah, she's great. Yeah, it's awesome. It's a book that will change your life. It will give you a lot of fuel for thought. Right?
Yeah, it definitely will. So, So get that book, everybody.
Yes, get that book. Get that book, right? We'll definitely have to make sure we put that up there in the comment box. It's like, okay, get this book, because it's a game changer. It's definitely a game changer. And there's a lot of beautiful authors, and it's interesting, when you look at some of the things that have been written,
and
decades ago.
Itself.
It does.
Oh my goodness.
It does. And I'll tell you, I don't know if anything's been repeated quite as drastic as it's been now on the globe. Maybe it was, but we didn't have the communication like we do now, right?
Yeah, that's very true. I was in Egypt in March, and I spoke at the Women's Economic Forum there. But after I spoke, I was able to go out and experience the pyramids. And speaking of history repeating itself, the pyramids have been around for thousands of years.
Right.
Egyptian history is just mind-blowing.
Yes.
And I know that we have repeated ourselves over and over and over again. And one of my very, very good friends is reading a book called The Rubicon, and it's all about Roman history. And he tried to explain a lot of it to me, Pompeii and all of it.
Right.
And it's the destruction, and then the rebuild, and then the destruction, and then the rebuild.
Exactly.
We just need to stay in the rebuild. And I don't know why, as humans, human nature, we continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. And we have to figure out how to prevent that. And with the technology that we have this day and age, we should be able to do that. We should be able to use history as what we should not do.
Oh, well, very well
Yeah.
said. Very well said. I agree. And hopefully, as we keep again getting the voices out there, right, and start doing that. When you reach that 100th monkey effect, are you familiar with that?
No, remind me.
Okay, the 100 monkey effect is there were monkeys on this island, totally isolated from monkeys over on another island, and they were given bananas. And one day, the monkey picked up the banana, and it had gravel all over it, sand. So he went down and he washed it off, right, and then he ate it. And then he started doing that every day, and the other monkeys started seeing him do that, right? And pretty soon, this tribe of monkeys over here on this island were doing that. And then all of a sudden, monkeys over here on this other island started doing it. So they call it the 100th monkey effect, that after so many,
Learned behavior.
right, happened, all of a sudden it was shifting and it was doing that ripple effect where it went over. And now it was happening over here. And then they saw it happening on other islands. And pretty soon, everywhere in the jungles that where the monkeys were, living close to the waters, they would all wash their food before they would eat it. So it's a habit, and it just goes. And we all are instinctive, we all have that ability, to say, oh, okay, somebody's psychic or intuitive or whatever, that sets them apart, they're different. Not so. Everyone has that gut reaction, that knowingness. Are you paying attention to it?
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah, and a lot of
listening to the
people aren't.
silent words? We talk about the silent voices, the unsilenced voices, right? But that silent voice that's inside, are we listening to it? I mean, we've been taught, back in the 70s when I started my journey in 1974, it was like you didn't talk about these things, right? Even through childhood, you had your 30 seconds to cry and that was it. That was it.
Yeah.
You're done. Right?
Get over it. That's how you guys were raised. Get over it.
Yeah, you're done. You had your 30 seconds. Now get on with life, right? But so you never really had that full expression. But at the same time, you start unveiling these things to be an expression of. And for me, I was a rebel. I was like your brother. I was the rebel. I had that instinctiveness all through my childhood. I used it as a weapon to get even because I was small, I was picked on. I grew up fighting. And again, it was that rebel, and I probably fought more than I needed to, but I felt I had to prove something to the world, And it was in the 80s before I actually decided that I really don't need to prove anything to anybody, right?
Yeah. But it took you that time to recognize and realize.
Yeah, and it's part of that growth. And I grew up in the Midwest. I'm second oldest of 11 kids. We grew up on a farm, strict Catholic, spent 12 years in a parochial school, the nuns, priest, the whole enchilada, right? And so again, you've got that whole belief system. I was sexually abused, but that's my story. It took me a long time to be able to get my story. I remember the first time I shared my story, in front of a live audience. It's like, wow, now I've just bared my soul, my whole genealogy to the world,
And then it also goes back to, what is everybody going to think about me?
I didn't have that. I
Okay.
really did. I didn't have that, but
That's
it
good.
can
I
go
know
that
a lot
way.
of
I
people
didn't
do,
have
yeah.
that, but it was like, wow, this is like really impactful.
Yeah.
Because I know there's going to be repercussions, but you know what? I was ready for it. And I had been having repercussions all my life, so it didn't matter. Bring it on, right? And it was interesting. Some of the responses were completely different from what I thought were going to be from some of my aunts and even some of my siblings. And others are like, so you had the extremes. You talk about the pendulum going both directions, right? But I was on the edge of suicide. And I was ready to check out. And I had 3 little ones at home that were under the age of 5 that I was responsible for. And that night I went out and I gave God a piece of my mind, right? And let me tell you, I gave him a really big piece of my mind.
And sometimes you need to.
Well, it's that expression, it's getting it out.
Yeah,
Again, the voice is being heard. Nobody could hear me other than the cornfields and my 2 ears.
Yeah.
But the anger that I had suppressed throughout my whole childhood was finally coming out. And I had a lot of anger and hate towards my father. But after that, getting all of that out, and then I started hearing the voices again, right? And the voices asked, are you done? And I said, yes. And that was my first aha surrender. That was my release, right? Yep. And then the voice says, who's going to take care of your kids if you're not here? Yeah. So that was a reality check. But, you know, the anger that I had, because all this anger was towards my father, who's the first voice I heard after that comment was my father saying, you know, if you're going to have these kids, you're going to have to take care of them because your mother and I have enough of our own. Whoa. So I had sex 3 times. I had 3 kids, you know. Ain't following this path, you know. Because Mom had 11 of us, right? You know, and again, so it's like, fine, if I got to be here through all of this, then this is what I want. It's time to make a deal, God, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when I was pissed off at God as well. There was a time in my life when I was with my abuser. This was before I wrote my play, before I wrote my book and started speaking up against domestic violence. I used to go on hikes. I used to take my dogs, which I no longer have. My abuser has my dogs. And I used to go on hikes and I used to scream at God, like, why is this happening? Why are you doing this? Da, 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 da. But it's that expression. It's being able to get it out, because I was caught in a horrific cycle. You've experienced a lot of trauma as well. And you understand sometimes it's cyclical. And I was with my abuser, we'll call him Paul, for 4 years, where it was over and over and over and over again, the same damn thing. You know, I would be abused, and then this apology stage, and then the walking on eggshell stage, and then the big blow up again. And I was abused. I had to stay inside because I had black eyes for months at a time. And I was pissed off at God. But I used to always hear, you know, a clear voice, you know, you're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And it was me trying to understand consciously what I knew subconsciously was not good for me. Right. And when I finally escaped, when I finally left that abusive relationship and started pouring my life and soul out on stage, so I ended up writing a 65-minute solo show where I played about 13 to 15 different characters, talk about the first time expressing yourself and telling your story from stage. I was terrified. Yeah. And then when I finally got it out, I remember when it debuted, it was February of 2016 at the Whitefire Solo Fest. There was like 70 some odd people in the audience. And at the end of the show, you could hear a pin drop. And then the applause came, and then people were like, I'm so happy that you shared this. I went through this as well. And it's when you express yourself, when you talk about the incidents that you've experienced, just like you did, then you're able to help so many people.
Oh, yeah, it impacts. And that's why it's so important to get those stories out, you know, and that's part of that healing process as well, right? You know, you're going to have the naysayers, but you're going to have the supporters, and you've got to focus on the supporters because it is a message that needs to get out, you know. And you hear a lot of people, and I'm sure you've heard this even when you were in the midst of it, you know, when people talk about, you know, someone in an abusive relationship, you know, well, they deserved it, or it's their fault, or, well, they should just get out of it. You just walk away from it. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. And so when you're hearing that only impacts you more, because now you internalize that what really is wrong with me.
You're wrong. Yeah. You think that, I remember when I was with my abuser, I used to think, well, maybe I did trigger him. Maybe I did do something wrong. You know, maybe my skirt was a little too short. But none of that matters. And, and when you fully get it out, and this is why I wrote my first book called But I Love Him. And it's my experience in that abusive relationship, but it's also why I stayed. And people don't understand, why didn't you just leave? I left seven plus times, like multiple times, but I just went back. And like I said before, it is a cycle, it's cyclical. So then, you know, you wanted to believe him, and then, you know, you went back, and then it happened again, and then it happened again.
And you know, and it doesn't happen instantaneous. It's a process, a slow process that brings you down. All of a sudden you're down here and you don't know how you got there. Yep. And you can't just like boom and jump out of it, right? Yep. And again, you know,
you have to climb that ladder out of the hole that you dug.
And when you do walk away from it, again, the hold that is on there, you're talking about that energy force, because they kind of have their claws in you, so to speak. They're called Akka cords. They play with your head, they play with your heart, they play with your sexual organs. All of these things are in play where the thoughts are moving from one person to another and impacting very, very strongly that people don't realize. So again, when you're walking out of it, all of a sudden it's like leaving a prison that you've been in for an extended period of time, and they put you out in the public, and now you don't know what to do because you've been in this predictability box. Regardless of what that predictability-ness is, it's your is, and that's what you know.
And then now you've got to break free
right,
and learn everything else.
And it's so foreign, and you don't have the support, and it's like, I can't handle this. And okay, you convince yourself, again, that justification, but I love him and he really loves me and he's really sorry, and so therefore, boom, you find yourself back in. It might be smooth for a little bit, and then all of a sudden the tables turn again, and like you say, you're walking on the eggshells, the whole process, because you know what's coming next, because it builds, because it's what? Predictable.
Yep, it is.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up the prison system, though. My brother actually was in prison for quite some time, and then when he got out, it was very, very hard for him. It's still hard for him even to use technology, because he lived in that box. The regime, everything was set. You had your meals at a certain time. You got to go outside a certain time. You went to bed at a certain time. You got woken up. So when he finally was released, it was a very difficult transition for him coming back to the real world. Thank God he had my mom and me still
to be able to,
system. Exactly. But a lot of the people in our prison systems, when they finally are released, they don't have the support.
No, they don't.
That's another injustice. That's another thing that needs to be changed in our society, is that we really do need to, especially the nonviolent criminals, we really do need to regulate them and help them to reintegrate back into society, and that doesn't happen right now.
And we're seeing that happening right now with this pandemic. People being confined and being isolated. The human element is not designed to not have interaction.
Yeah, and this is why there's so many people anxious, anxiety-filled, fear. They don't know what to do. This is why alcohol sales went up 50%.
Yeah.
Because of the pandemic, because they're just self-medicating.
Yeah, they don't. Exactly. They don't.
I'm not innocent of this, right? I am definitely not innocent of this. I drink more wine now because of the pandemic, because I'm stuck at home. I'm not going to lie, but it is. We're not supposed to be isolated.
The psyche doesn't. The psyche shifts in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, the whole psyche shifts around that separation. It's like being in prison. Because now you've been isolated for that extended period of time, and the fear that we've been fed, the whole psyche shifts. So now when you are out and you're in a place, and I'm a people watcher.
Yeah.
Okay, and when you understand how the mind works and how it connects with the brain and all the neurotransmitters and everything's running, and you watch this, you walk in a store. And you just walk by people and keep on going. You're talking and whatever, right? All of a sudden now you're walking and someone's coming your direction. All of a sudden you feel this shift of energy, and they're like, and then they move like you're contagious or something, it's like, whoa. To watch that happen. Now, I've been on the planet 70 years, Michelle.
Wow. You don't look 70, by the way.
I'm actually, in my embodiment and in my mind, I'm 45. Right.
Yay.
Yeah. But to be able to observe what's going on, never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would even remotely see anything like this.
Yeah, I know. Walking down the street, people who are walking by themselves are wearing masks right now, which is crazy to me. But then when we come up to each other, one of us literally goes on the street while the other one stays on the sidewalk.
I don't do that. Here we go with rebel me, right?
Yes, rebel
I refuse to wear a mask because I'm not going to be suffocating myself and breathing carbon dioxide. I might as well turn my car on in the garage and and just sit there, right?
Well, there's a
But
lot of places where I live where it's mandatory. Like,
yeah, see, and if there's a mandatory
you have
place,
to wear it.
I won't wear it. I won't go in.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I guess you
So
don't need my business. I'm
he
gone.
won't be coming to LA anytime soon
That's
because
right.
it's mandatory everywhere here.
Yeah.
You go into a grocery store if you don't have a mask, a doctor's office if you don't have a mask, they won't let you in. And right now we're starting to open, and by the time that this is actually aired, we will be open. And the thing is with the pandemic, and then on top of that, the protest, we'll see what happens with the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because if it does, blow up again, like some people are believing,
Right.
then we might be in trouble. But we are slowly opening, and people are going into restaurants and not knowing what to do because we wear our mask, and then as soon as we're in the restaurant, we take it off because we eat and drink. So it's so confusing. We're in a very confusing time, Beverly.
Right.
And,
Well, and then I think personally, we all need to really take a deep look at what's going on here. Where is your mindset? Because the power is in the mind. If you believe it, you're going to get it. So if you believe that you're going to get corona, you're going to. But you know what? Coronavirus is in your DNA. It's already in your body. What are you going to do to trigger it or to not trigger it? Now, I'm 70 years old. I've never been sick a day in my life. Never.
Good for you.
Never had a cold, never nothing, right?
Good for you.
Because it's not an option for me.
Yeah, no.
And again,
there's different perspectives. Like
Yeah.
my friend who is 34 years old just died of coronavirus, and a longtime friend. I haven't talked to him in years, but then I was notified that he had passed away due to coronavirus. I have another friend who had coronavirus, and she's 36 years old, and she was in the hospital on respirators. I live with somebody who's 75 years old. So if coronavirus, just if it is as toxic as what people are saying, I do want to take some precautions still.
Well, it's true with anything. You take precaution, and it's the mindset. But the fear is what's going to trigger. We know that stress is like 95% of all discomfort.
Yeah, and it will
Goes back to
exemplify any
stress.
disease.
Right.
Yeah, it will.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about, changing the mindset, your thoughts, feelings.
And
all of
and
those
what can
things.
you do for your immune system? If your immune system is compromised, it doesn't matter what it is out there. Doesn't matter.
You're gonna get sick.
Something's going to happen. And if you're already compromised and then you start triggering that stress releases and those fears, it's going to escalate, right? But it takes discipline. It takes discipline and understanding, and to be able to understand what the functions are and how the mind and the spirit work together. We've been talking for years, mind, body, spirit, mind, body, spirit, mind, body, spirit. Well, what is that?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And it's beginning to become a household word. More people are starting to say, what is my connection to, I know I have a soul, or I believe I have a soul. What does that mean? What does my soul, how does it impact this vessel that we're walking around in? And how can I keep this, And so and again, it's awareness. And I really believe what we're talking about here and getting that voice out. And getting perspectives
and it's back to what you're talking about, outwitting the devil. It's back to that book.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It is. The fear that's happening in our society is escalating, and because of that, then there are possibly more cases, or because of that, then there's more ailments, there's more things happening. So it is, regulating yourself and learning how to connect and live in harmony, like we talked about.
You go back into that harmony, that balance as well, and that belief, the information that's being put out there. Now because you got two sides of the fence. We're in the duality world. You have hospitals that are saying, that death was connected with, whether it was or not, with that coronavirus, because of what? Money, right? The hospitals are getting a big percentage, a big chunk of change if they put it on that death certificate. So now it's like, well, are the figures true or not? But it escalates, saying,
Either way, it's rough. I was in Milan in February.
Is.
I was in Milan at the end of February. I was also in London, and then I was also in New York in March. And so when I walked through the streets of Milan, this was, very early stages, and people were terrified I was
Right.
lucky that I went into a restaurant that was actually open during that time. But the stats overseas, a lot of them are correct, but then a lot could be because of other ailments or illnesses.
Right.
And like I said, I work in Africa. In Africa, there are very few cases. In Ghana and Sierra Leone, I mean, Africa is huge, but in the two countries that I work in, but very, very few cases. But some people are testing positive now. And, it's their rainy season, so it's getting a little colder. But people are terrified. People are scared. People are wearing masks. We're doing sensitizations on how to stay clean,
Right.
how to wash your hands, how to use bleach to clean things. So you can stay safe. I think that no matter what it is, whether it be a COVID-19 pandemic, Spanish flu, or some other thing that could possibly happen in our near future, it is how do we take care of ourselves? How do we regulate ourselves so we don't live in fear, so we're more susceptible to some type of illness like that?
And you tapped on a good word there, the sanitation, right? I mean, you can go back through civilization, right? And you go back to when smallpox epidemics were out and different childhood, measles epidemics and chickenpox and things. They didn't die from the disease, they died from the unsanitariness, right? So again, we go back and look at where that sanitation is and get that out there, because that plays a big role on your immune system. Right. And then the dietary thing, we ban such fast food stuff, what you're putting in doesn't
Especially
even
in America.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of variables to that. And it's bringing those variables that have swung way out here, bringing them back into that path of harmony, right?
Yeah.
And
that's what we want to live in.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. And
again, we want
Yeah.
to live in harmony. We want to live in peace.
Yeah.
We want to see our world a better place. And in order to do so, we all need to speak up, and we all need to regulate ourselves. Because when you regulate, like you said, from within, then you're able to express and help other people do the same thing. And that's what we need to do, is start this huge domino effect to end all these injustices, to end all this discrimination, and to really make significant change so we don't repeat ourselves in another 100 years from now.
Very well said. It's that synergism of energy. The synergism of fear is no different than the synergism of peace and harmony and love. So let's focus on that so that it can override the fears, right? And do our best to change the world, to become that better us as we continue to go, because every time you become a even better you, the world around you becomes an even better place.
Exactly.
So Michelle, my gosh, we could continue this conversation.
We could talk forever. Yeah, I would love to offer your viewers a free gift though.
Sure.
If they text UNITE, UNITE, text UNITE to 26786, then they'll get a free PDF file, a 6-page PDF of the 5 steps to overcome obstacles. Again, it's text UNITE to 26786. And if you're international, Beverly, I know that you deal with a lot of international clients, so a lot of your viewers are international. You can find that information on michellejewsbury.com as well.
Right. And if you want to know the correct spelling of her name, it's down here. It'll also be up over top, so you'll know who she is, right?
How do you spell that? Yeah, I do that so many times.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show. It's an honor to have you here. We definitely need to get you back and, continue this conversation again. A lot of great morsels. So I hope all of you listening out there had a great time listening to the information that she has shared. Comment below. Let us know what you liked most about it. If you want to reach out to Michelle, you want to reach out to, anything that she has going with her Unsilenced Voices, let her know. Comment below, private message her, friend her over there on Facebook. She's on all the social medias. Just look up her name and you'll find her, right?
Great. Thank you so much, Beverly. Yeah, you can reach out to me any way that you can. I'm on every platform.
Right. And if you can't find her, then next text me and say, who was that chick that was on there, was talking about this? And we'll get you there, right?
Perfect.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Now it's time to say, go out there, be that best you that you can be, because Michelle and I are going to be the best we that we can be. And we'll see you all on the next show. Bye for now.